art and science, and especially to Symvisio XI. We're going to have a lot of fun tonight. After the presentation, it's going to be a question and answer, and in the lobby there's going to be food. Then after that, there's going to be some telescopes set up by the SMCAS folks looking at Jupiter. So you're going to get everything. It's a great night, plus it's all free. All right? You can't beat that. So, what should we say? Mohsen Janatpour. Who does not know Mohsen? Mohsen's a great guy. He's been here since 1963 in the United States. And initially, he went to study pre-med at San Jose City. But then he saw a book by Bertrand Russell about relativity. That set him off on a different tangent. Away from medicine to science, mathematics. Around the same time, though, he worked at Varian Associates in Palo Alto on a lunar mapping project. And so his work enabled the astronauts to Apollo 11 to land on the moon. I think that's really cool. So Mohsen's been here. Yeah, go. So Mohsen's been at CSM since 1980, and is Professor of Physics, Math, and Astronomy, Director of the Astronomy Program of the Planetarium. What else can I say? So, without further ado, let's introduce the master of painting, my friend, my mentor, Mohsen Janatpour.
Good work. It's broken. Hold on 1 second. Here we go. Hello. Do you hear me? Good. And I hear me too. All right. Thank you, Daryl. Before I start and before I forget, I want to thank a bunch of people. And events like this takes quite a bit of work and a lot of support. Number one, and more than anything else, I want to thank my students and all other students who have helped me with this project. Thank you, guys. Also, we have 2 student volunteers who are helping with food. Marco Zavala and this one, I don't know if I can pronounce it right, Yanrei Chu. And she is somewhere around here. Give a hand up for her, that's that. And we also have in our audience our president, Mike Blair. Mike, are you there? Could you stand up? There we go. See? Ron, are you here?
I'm here.
Oh, I didn't see him. So, but my wife said, Ron is here. He's our chancellor. Would you give a hand for him, please? Thank you. Yeah. Good. Really, the reason we do things like that is because we have a complete support from our administration, from Ron, from Mike, and my administrator was supposed to be, my dean was supposed to be here. Charlene, are you here? No. By the way, you can see me, but I cannot see you. You have to remember that. So we're going to keep that in mind as we go along. All right. Now, what I'd like to do tonight, I'd like to start the program with the title. Let's see if I can do this right. In the title, we have 3 keywords. One is texture, the other one is emotion, and the third one is Symvisio. And what I like to do, I want to talk about each one of those terms very briefly, and if you want more detail, you can either come and talk to me or ask me a question at the end. But very briefly, to get a common idea of what I mean by texture, or emotion, or Symvisio. And then we see the relationship between those. And at the end, I'm going to bring all those together in introduction of my Syvisio XI. That's the program for tonight. That's what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to start with the texture. Now, to do that, what I want you to do first, I want you to close your eyes and reach on the seat, on your own seat, okay? And touch around and feel the material or materials that you feel. And keep doing that for a couple of seconds or so. And see if you can really tell by touching what kind of material you're touching. Did you do that? Okay. How many of you, bring the light up for a second for me, please. The house light? Okay. How many of you could tell by just touching what kind of material you were touching? Raise your hand. You see, some people couldn't do it. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, that's all right. I know it was psychologist. All right. Okay. What you just did is what we call perceptual, or tactile perception. And that's what it is, really. You're perceiving something by just touching it. That's what you're doing. Now, there's a lot to be said about that. Okay, you can go to the light down, please. Thanks. All right. Now, so there are some dictionary definitions that I want to give you first. So if you look at it, this is the one that actually you just did. Okay? It is what you have is the feel appearance of something when you touch it. And that is the kind of definition. This is sometimes we call it the subjective definition of texture, because it is what you are feeling. The second one is the structure of the substance. I don't know, I took this, by the way, out of dictionary. These are not my words. So if there's a grammatical problem here, Bill, it's not my fault. All right? On this here, what you see is that the material, what it is made of. And I don't know why they chose specifically chewing. But it is true. We always talk about the texture of the food. We often do that. The next one, I really don't know what it means. But I had to put it in. Okay? Because it was in the dictionary. And I tried to figure it out. I said, well, maybe I can make up something for it. But it's really stupid. So I said, forget about it. But next one actually is the one that people who are in computer are quite familiar with. Because what it is, there are several programs nowadays that they go and impose details on the image, and by that they mean texture. All right? That's dictionary definition. It's very nice, it is intuitive, but it often doesn't work. Normally intuition goes wrong. So people who are studying these things, they come up with the more technical definitions. So I'm going to give you a few technical definitions of what the texture is. To do so, we break texture into categories. Before I start there, I should tell you two things. People have two general categories of textures. One of them we call dynamic texture, the other one we call it static texture. Dynamic texture, you see that, for example, in always involves element of time. Music always has a dynamic texture. The wave, the ocean has a dynamic texture. Things of that nature always you find element of time in it. That I will leave behind. That's as far as I go with that. I want to get more to static texture. And when we look at it, then we talk about visual texture. And this is now more definition that psychologists and, in fact, some computer scientists work with. And why the computer scientists work with this? Because they're trying to develop robots that they can really use texture and identify things. Another place that this is becoming very important is in the, guess what? My son plays it, everybody else plays it, computer games. In the computer games, you need that. You need this kind of definition to work with. The second one is the sonic texture, and basically texture in the sound. What does it mean? Well, if you ever have listened to a note played by flute, let's say, and played by violin, for example, the same note played, you can't tell the difference, whether it is violin sound or is it sound from the flute. Why? Because what physicists call it overtones. Musicians call it tone quality or timbre. And that is one way we look at it. What is it? It is that when you play, a note is not a pure tone. It's a whole spectrum of overtones that goes with it, gets mixed with it, and that gives that quality of that note. So you hear that. So that's what we mean by texture in that sense. There is also texture in music done differently. They call it thick and thin texture. Thick texture comes in when you have overlay of several instruments on top of each other. So you have the brass section and the strings section overlapping music, and then that gives a richness to the music. Also, sometimes people talk about the textures by the number of notes that are played in single measure. So, although it is a tiny bit ambiguous because it refers to three different things, they are really related. So that's what we get in terms of the sonic texture. The next one is the tactile texture. That's the one that we were talking about. What is that? It's patterns of the graininess, granularity of the object, plus the hardness. That's actually a very tricky one. The first time I read a technical paper on it, I was really taken by it. Because when you think about it, especially if you're a cook, you have so many variations of textures that you deal with. And I was amazed that that spectrum of variation can be explained by two simple parameters. How granular the medium is and how hard it is. The combination of two covers everything. There was a few years ago that there were some psychologists who were trying to come up that you need a third parameter to do that. Actually, the recent papers that are coming up shows that actually those two parameters, hardness and granularity, is sufficient to tell you about everything you want to know about the tactile texture. Now, there is one more I want to talk about, and this one is going to be, I just thought it's fun to do it because I want some bamboozle some people who are non-scientists and see what they think. It's kind of, is we call cosmological texture. Where are my astronomers around here? Cosmological texture is actually very cool. It is, well, let me tell you what it is. There are different theories that try to predict how the universe began, how it's going, and probably everybody has heard about Big Bang or things of that nature. And quite often, these are defined in terms of certain mathematical models, the topological models we call it. The texture is a topological, listen carefully, texture is a topological defect in, that's a theory which features a spontaneous symmetry breaking. Listen, did you hear what's that? Here it is. Okay? What that means, but the reason I brought it up is this. Not everything that we know about texture, even in technical sense, refers to human touch and senses. These are actually defined textures that deal with the mathematics, with the structure of the space-time. And in fact, what is important about this here, that one of the consequences of this topological defect, and people are trying to show that, is that what we call big, cool regions of the background radiation. You see, long time ago, and physicists have different time, cosmologists have different time, but everybody is somewhere around 14 billion years ago, they believe, something happened. Some people call it Big Bang, there are all kinds of things. But the idea is that when that happened, at the very beginning, the universe was totally pure radiation. And then it was totally opaque. But eventually it became less opaque and radiation scaled. And over time, that radiation has cooled down and down and down and down. And now, when you look at it, in every breast you look at, we see cosmic radiation. We can measure its temperature, which is around minus 257 degrees. It's kind of cool. Okay? Now, with that given, there are certain regions of the space where temperature is even cooler. And nobody knows why. The cosmological texture is attempting to answer that question. Now, unfortunate part is that no one has still discovered anything that resembles the cosmological defect. So we don't have to worry about it. Now, those are all technical definitions, but I want to tell you what is my view of texture, how I see texture. And the way I see it is this. When I look at something, when you look at something, we have what we call a perceptual field. In your perceptual field, we detect two very important factors. I mean, if you look for yourself, Helen, can I have a light on that side for a second? To my left. If you look over here, the first thing that comes to your mind are what we call macroscopic or global features. See that? Like you see the head of a horse, or you see a chariot, or you see 4 horses, or things like that. Those we call macroscopic features. But within that, also you have what we call microscopic details that you see. Macroscopic feature is what we call form. Microscopic feature is what we call texture. And that's what it is. So if you look at it over here, that's what I have. In every perceptual field, you have a macroscopic or global feature, which is form. And you have microscopic feature, which is texture. And that's how I see it. Now, it gets more interesting. What is interesting, you will see that the variation of the texture is what gives rise to seeing the form, perceiving the form. So basically, again, what you have is the variation of the texture giving you the form. So what does that mean? That means that the richness that you see in the form has to come from texture. So if it's less textured, it wouldn't be as rich. That's simple as that. Now, look at this. And look at this abstract painting. You see it? What do you think of this? It's very cool, huh? I did that. I'm lying. I didn't do it. This actually, what it is a small part of there, right there. I took that region, look at the texture of that, and show you what happens. Now, in the next picture, this is really cool, isn't it? You could easily see how the variation of the textures leads to the form. Now, you may think that, okay, wait a minute, how about the color? Okay, let's take the color away. You see it again. That's what it is. So, texture is what really does the job for you. Now, normally if I were in my class at this point, I say, are there any questions? But I don't do that now. All right? Now, that's all I want to say about texture. I'll come back to it in a little bit, but keep that in mind. Now, the next question is, what is emotion? Oh, man, that is one of the hardest things. Well, for one thing, for example, my wife always tells me she's more emotional than me. Okay? And there may be a truth to that. I'll tell you why. But she does that. Sometimes people, by being emotional, mean that I am more sensitive. Have you heard that? That is around. That's quite a bit. Quite a people, that's the way people think about it. But actually, emotion in the most general form defined simply reaction to your environment. That's what it is. Any organism that reacts to its environment, that reaction is emotion. So amoeba have emotion. Probably amoeba is more emotional than I am. But that's what it is. Amoeba do have emotion. And was it amoeba or amoeba? I don't know. One of those. Is the fact that every organism, in order to survive, has to react to its environment. That reaction requires certain physiological changes that takes place. And that is what we call features of emotion. Now, there are all kinds of emotion. But what is interesting, psychologists have been able to break it down into two groups. One group, what we call basic emotions, and one of the guys who did a lot of this work is Paul Ekman. And then, you know, the guy who played Lie to Me, that show, whatever it was based on that guy's research. Anyway, Paul Ekman and others studied in detail biological basis of emotion, and they came up with the basic emotions. And normally, depending which psychologist you look at, the number of basic emotions go from about 6 to about 10. The one that I like is 8. And my students know because that's the power of 2, right? The other group of emotions are what we call complex emotions. By the way, basic emotions are common to every species, from amoeba to man. Every one of them has the basic emotion. Why? Because basic emotions are necessary for the survival of any species. Those who believe in evolutionary processes, they really swear by this idea that these 8 basic emotions arise from 8 very important needs that are required for the survival. But we have complex emotions. How do they come about? As species evolve, as we get further along the evolutionary ladder, we get emotions that combine, and the combinations combine, and get more and more and combine. And nowadays, for example, we have somewhere around 254 different emotions that we can name. We can tell what it is, like fear, love, I don't know. But that's too good enough, right? But there are some. Now, this is actually a chart that I made up. This, Bill has seen this. This is a chart I took from my book that I've been trying to finish. The 8 circles that you see, or ovals that you see, these 8 ovals are 8 basic emotions. So, for example, if you look at it up there, you see joy. The opposite of it is sadness. Those are the basic emotions. Now, you may wonder, what does it mean when we say an amoeba is joyful or an amoeba is sad? They don't have faces, do they? What do we mean when we say an amoeba is sad? Basically, they refer to whether the stimulus that they get, they like it, they go toward it, or they hate it, or they run away from it. Okay? So we have basic emotions, but so here's the interesting one. For example, if you take joy and you get the trust and combine them together, you get a new emotion that we call love. That's what we call sometimes dyadic emotion. Then you can have tertiary emotions and so on. The emotions can build up, you get more and more and more and more. So in this picture you can see then I have, for example, 8 basics, and out of it I also came up with 8 dyadic emotions. And you can build up more, and you can go all the way to emotions. But there are a lot of emotions that we cannot, that's important to know for what I'm going to do later. Now, I think it should be a little bit closer. Here we go. Now, depending on how far up the ladder of the evolution you are, complex emotions can have different components. At most, human beings, they have what we call 5 components of emotion. The first one is the cognitive or appraisal. What it is that if you want to get emotional about something, some psychologists believe that first you have to see what it is that you're getting emotional about. It's not conscious appraisal. Yeah, it's very subconscious, but that's the first stage. The second stage of it is bodily symptoms. Okay? For example, you're walking around and you see a bear. Okay? You recognize, damn, that's a bear. Right? That's your appraisal. And the appraisal is, man, I'm toast. Right? Or dinner. The second one is your bodily symptoms. You start shaking, you can go out here, you sweat, and all kinds of things can happen. You react to it. The third one, you take an action. This is sometimes they call it fight or flight. There's a bear, do I fight it or do I run? But normally they tell you have to sit down, right? Don't do that. That's the people who want you to be calm. All right? So, the third one is you take some kind of action. But that entails an expression. If you look at this, for example, you're running and crying and screaming. All right? You express it. Right? And the last one is I put it separately, and that one, as far as we know, okay, as far as we know, is unique to human beings. Although I have a dog, his name is Magnum, and Magnum has a lot of feeling. He expresses it, and his feelings get hurt very easily. Okay, so I know psychologists haven't met my dog yet, but it's there. Now, there are certain major components that are elements that affect emotion. Okay, there are all kinds of things, but the 3 major elements that works of art really affects emotion is important to know. In music, I have three of them. The first one is the mode, whether the music is written in, or sang or played in a major key or a minor key makes a big difference. If it's major key, it's more happy often. If the minor key is kind of sad, and so on and so forth. So it affects your emotion. That's one. The second one is the tempo. Well, you all know that. I mean, I don't need to tell you that. If a fast music comes in, everybody gets up and dances. Okay? Slow music, some people go to sleep. All right? That's emotional reaction. Okay? You're bored. Now, the third one is the texture. That's what I was telling you. The quality of the notes that are played definitely affects your emotion. That's why playing a piece by violin affects your emotion entirely differently than if the same piece is played by, let's say, a cello, or going on the other wind instrument by flute, or by saxophone. Each one of them has a different quality, and each one of them affects your emotion differently. In painting, there are three also. Isn't that amazing? Because I chose three. The first one is form, okay? As you can see over here, is quite often, the form is a very important part of it. If you have a jagged, the form, shape is kind of hard. If you have a smooth one, it gets you a soothing feeling and so on. The second one is color. Color really affects emotion drastically. That's why you paint most of the hospitals, mental hospitals in particular, you try to paint them in pastel color because they soothe you down. There's an interesting study that's going on between how emotion affects the people in the West as opposed to people in the East. For example, in China. It's amazing how the color comes. The things that are affecting us one way in Chinese culture affect us differently. Which is kind of nice. And the third one, of course, is texture. And that is the topic of my talk. Now, if you look at the texture and emotion, now I'm going to ask you to actually reflect on your own feelings. I'm going to show you a set of slides and see how it does affect your emotion. And you be the judge of it, whether it does or not. You don't have to tell me. I read the statistics, so if you don't raise your hand, it's okay. Okay, I want you to look at that one and look at this one, these two pictures. You see the texture of this one, at least the studies show, the texture of this one makes you feel better, and texture of this one actually makes you nauseous. Okay? That's ugly. Okay? So, but there are studies show you, I show you some things, that there are actually certain companies now that they're investing millions of dollars to study the effect of texture and colors on emotion because they want to sell products. Now, color does affect the emotional impact of texture. Even if you have the same texture, if you have a different color, you get different emotion. Look at this film and think what you think about it. Reflect on your emotion. And I'm going to keep this texture the same, and then I'm going to change the color. And you see that it's not the same feeling, is it? The feeling changes, doesn't it? It does. Again, if it doesn't in your case, I know a good psychologist. All right? Now, here I took the color away for you to see the effect of the texture itself only. Now, The reverse is true too. Texture affects the emotional impact of color. Look for yourself. Look at this color. Feel about it. Do you feel it? Yeah. Now look, I changed the texture. That actually is the same color, even though you don't see it, it is. If somebody put color meter on this texture changes it. Suddenly it becomes a nice, well, not too nice, but kind of nice. Right? Now, I'm going to give a few quick examples for you to think about. Look over here. This is one that was done in quite a bit of studies. Some people say when they look at something like that, they feel religious. Does anybody here feel that? No. Bunch of irreligious people. All right. And how about this one? This is supposed to make you feel good. That's the feel of gold. I know for some of you feel good, for sure. Now, this one is actually computer-generated texture. Again, you don't have to tell me, but I want you to see that each one has a different kind of emotion associated with it. My wife likes this one. I showed her that before we come. Yeah, I was testing all of these on her. Every one of those, you saw I tested. And I took notes. This made her feel good. Now, some examples of, let's see if you can tell how your emotion changes with just the texture changes. This one. Helen, for this one, I need you to bring the light down a little bit more. Could you please? Bring the house light down. Yeah. That's better. Good. Okay, this is, astronomers would like this, but most people get a heebie-jeebie from it. This one, I heard somebody say, whoa, yeah, it is. Is that it kind of scares people. This one is actually the texture of the regular leather, and see how it makes you feel. How about this one? I don't know, but it was a mistake. Now, here's the picture I want to show you to tell you what kind of study people do. And today, we are lucky to have computers because people can do that. They take two textures, that one and this one, and they mix them by percentage, certain percentage. So you, at the end, you end up with, you start with this one, and at the end, stay with that. And they record people's emotional responses to them. And they do correlations to see how it is affected. All the studies that I keep telling you about are based on this kind of analysis. They do it, they get the people, they put the probes on them, they can measure the sweat on their hand, they can measure the heartbeat, they can measure the brain wave, and all of these, they don't rely on just the words. And they measure this thing to see how they respond to different textures. How about this? Anybody knows what this is? Okay, I tell you, it's really cool actually. Back to, let me take my philosopher hat off. Now I'm scientist again. Now, we have two very important theories right now in physics. One we call quantum mechanics, which can explain things at the microscopic level, at that level of atoms and at the level of subatoms, nucleus, and so on. We have another theory called general theory of relativity, which can explain everything on big scale. It can explain to us about the galaxies and clusters and all of those kinds of stuff. Basically, it's the theory of gravity. But the problem we have, the two don't mesh. When we try to bring general relativity to a situation where we're trying to explain things at atomic and subatomic level, everything falls apart. So one of the major things that physicists are trying to do is trying to find a way to merge these two theories together. Somehow find a theory that on the big scale is going to be general theory of relativity, at the little scale it's going to be the quantum mechanics. This is one attempt in that direction. It's called loop quantum gravity. The idea is that at the very small scale, at the very fabric of the space, is made out of these loops, interwoven loops, the structures of that form. And sometimes people call these spin networks. Those of you who are mathematics know what I'm talking about. But these are spin network, and when they combine together, they become what they call a spin foam. But the idea is that space-time itself has a texture. This is it, okay? This is a model by Carlo Ravalli of what the texture of the space-time is at the very small scale. What do I mean small scale? Small scale people normally talk about is at the level of Planck's length, which is 10, what I put it together, 1 with about 35 zeros preceding it, and a point. So with the point 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 35 times 1. Very small, very short distance. 10 to the minus 35 meters. So that's what it's going to be. Now, that's loop quantum gravity. The other one that I want to talk about is this one. This is kind of cool too. How many of you just very recently saw the movie called Theory of Everything? Yeah. It's about this kind of stuff. What you're seeing here is that something interesting happens when you go to small scale. There's a principle in physics called Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which basically says that you cannot measure the velocity in that one direction and the position in that same direction as accurately as you want. In other words, if one of them you get too accurate, the other one gets really ambiguous. The idea is that when you try to get very small space-time, then what's going to happen, the energy becomes tremendous. That energy creates what we call virtual particles, a particle and antiparticle. And they basically bubble. They come into existence and go out of existence. And in fact, this is the mechanism by which Hawking was explaining that black holes evaporate. In other words, black holes don't always stay, they get smaller. But the idea is that when that happens, these particles, imagine come into existence, going out of existence, they create bubbles of energy, which we call quantum foam. That's what that is. Now, for me, as a physicist kind of turned artist, both of those are examples of a space-time texture. That's what it is. Now, that's all I want to say about that motion and texture. Now let's go to somewhere else. Every work of art is the child of its age, and in many cases, the mother of our emotions. That's a silly tendency. And in other words, you cannot have artwork that doesn't express emotion. Look at this. This is a very cool thing. It's actual card. In 1935, Merritt was sitting with Picasso and another artist whose name escapes me right now, at a restaurant. And the guy, they were waiting and waiting and waiting. The waiter or waitress poured the coffee and went to bring the cream. Didn't show up, didn't show up, didn't show up. Finally, Picasso turned around and said, damn, if this lady doesn't show up for a while, there's going to be fur growing on my cup. Merritt went to the store immediately, bought the cup, bought the spoon, bought the saucer, bought fur, came home and glued it, and this is what he got. That's what became a big centerpiece of art in 1936. But here's the important part. If you were looking at a cup with a different texture, definitely you would feel different emotion. This really gives you a different emotion. If you don't think that is the case, make a cup like that and try to drink your coffee in the morning. See? So it does. I like this. John Constable is one of my favorite painters of all time. And he wrote that in 1821. And I really think he is up to something. Painting is all about feeling. I started otherwise. I started a long time ago as a surrealist, and then I started trying to have messages in my painting, and then I finally said, that's stupid. Okay? I just have to have, you feel kind of bad that you were wrong before, but that's the way it is. I really do think painting is all about feeling. So, what am I talking about? Texture in the painting. There's actual texture. For example, in this painting. In this painting, you have actual texture. This is really painted with sand. In fact, I had to paint this when the painting was horizontal. I was overing over it. My brother, who's in the audience, had built me a plateau that I could just hang over it and paint as I went along. So this is the one I painted. The reason I like this painting quite a bit is that this, of course, is a rock called Montezuma Rock, and these are the mesas that Indians used to live in. It is actually 4,000 feet high and looks like a person. So I thought that's a cool part. But in here I have that piece of film repeated, but right in there, there is a photograph. You cannot see it. Later on you can come and see it. It was taken here at the St. John Cemetery for one of my students. And I actually saw that photograph. I got his permission to put it in my painting. And I built up the painting around that photograph. Why? It was one of the nicest things I've ever seen in terms of expression. All you see a tombstone full of ivy, nothing else. And right in there, there is a word partly covered. It says Bob. That's it. Think about that. Now, that's the actual texture. Then there's the implied texture. In this painting, I have mainly implied texture. And they come two kinds. There is the simulated one. For example, in here, I try to simulate the texture of gold. And then the second one is actually invented texture. This is the texture of the horses is the one that I invented. That's a common thing. Now, having said that, oh, let me tell you what is this? I don't know what this is. I just like this picture. I said I put it in. It has nothing to do with my talk. But it's cool. Look at them. These are the members of CSM faculty and the administrator. Look how everybody is happy. And there is my sister right there. We're separated by parents, but that's where she is, right there. Okay? But now, next thing is, what is Symvisio? Very quickly, a Symvisio is a word that I made up. Sim means putting together, visio means viewing, so Symvisio together means viewing it together. I made it up for a certain kind of composition I made. And in fact, I had to have my wife have it patented, or not patented, what do you call it, copyright, so that I could always use it. But those of you who are artists here, please go make your own Symvisios. I would never object to it. I'd love you to do it. Now, Symvisio to visual art is like symphony is to music. There are different parts. You have music, you have different movements. In Symvisio, I have different unfoldments. And from one unfoldment, you go to another, to another, to another, and then as a whole become one piece of art. The same way it is the case with music. And each panel of Symvisio is compositionally complete. In other words, if you just saw one panel by itself, you don't need anything else to think that it is a good painting. If it's lousy, it's lousy. But it should be complete with itself. But when you put it together, you get a bigger picture. The same way is true with the symphony. Each movement in itself is complete. But when you put all movements, 4 of them, or 5 of them, or sometimes 2 of them, together, then you get a bigger, more complete unity out of the system. Symvisio has a direction. In other words, it starts from the left. The first panel introduces the keys and whatever you want to compose in, and then you can change your key variation of it if you want. You move on, and first leads to the second leads to the third, and finally you have the recapitulation. Okay? Now, let me go to the next one. But this is the part that is most important. When I started with Symvisio, the first that I started, my first 3 Symvisios actually are abstract Symvisios. There I started with the geometric form. The first one was, I started with a plane, and look at the planes, simply rectangular shape. The second one, I dealt with only conic sections, did like parabola, hyperbolas, stuff like that. And the third one, I started a variation of that, getting into 3D forms of the conic sections. And then I moved on to further down the line. The 2 Symvisios I want to show you quickly. The first one is Symvisio number 6, the next one 7. Why it is important here? Remember I told you that there were 3 elements of composition: form, color, and texture. In Symvisio 6, my emphasis was on color. Of course, you're going to have form and texture, but the emphasis is on, here is the first introduction of it. As you can see, Symvisio 6, first unfoldment, and this introduces the key signature. This is the second one, the third, the fourth, and the fifth. These are the 5. Now I put them together for you. That's what you get. That's the Symvisio number 6. The emotional impact of this Symvisio is mainly through the color. The next Symvisio, my emphasis was form. So colors are muted down. They're less color. I'm just trying to look at the emotional impact of form. So here's the first one. Here's the second one. Here's the third one. Here's the fourth one. And here's the fifth. Now I put it together. This is what you get. This is the Symvisio number 7. Now, in my present Symvisio, the one that is behind the curtain, my game was trying to exploit or explore the effect of texture. So, here what I have, I need to get, this is the first time I have done this, so you have to bear with me. If my clothing is not going to be right, because I didn't know somebody's going to video it. So you're going to see I have funny pants on, but that's the way it's going to be. I'm just warning you, that's the way it's going to be. Don't be upset. All right? So what I'm going to have, I'm going to show you the start of the Symvisio number 11. Of course, the music that is inspired me for this Symvisio, besides other things I will explain shortly, was the pastoral of Beethoven, number 6. Okay, that's what I normally do. Go to my studio, put the music on. And the next thing I do, okay, why doesn't it work? That's a Stanford pants, by the way. some of my son who is in Maryland right now. Now, I could spend the next 2 years and show you what I did, but I think I want to tell you about it and show it to you now. It's called Symvisio number 11. It is in 5 unfoldments. A walk with the guardians of Earth. It is in umber and green, and it is dedicated to my wife, Lynn. Okay? Ellen? Check it out. Okay, let's get it. Ellen, where are you? Screen up, please. Ellen. The screen up. The machine is stuck. Should we cut it? Uh-oh. I guess you have to look at this. Good way. Just hold on 1 second. What is holding you? Okay. In practice, it worked fine. And then, what's happening? Okay, thanks. Okay, I think so. I think I should tell the story. Okay. Well, you may want to know why I dedicated this to my wife. Okay, while she's doing that, I'll tell you that story. Because actually, she's the one who is responsible for me doing all of this. From the start to now. Nowadays, she's a big motivation in the sense of getting there and paint. That's the motivation, speech. But what happened was that actually, when we were on our honeymoon, long time ago, we were in Hawaii, and we had nothing else to do. So we went to art gallery. And I was looking at this prints by Boulanger. By the way, my wife major and degree is in art. So we go to, in the Boulanger prints were $5,000. And I said, $5,000 for a print? And she said, well, do you think you can do it? I said, sure I can. So we come to our hotel room. She gets a bag and munches it out. She pushes it on the table. And there was the hotel stationery and pencil. I said, go ahead, draw this. I said, okay. I sat down and whatever I saw, I just copied it on a piece of paper. And I gave it to her. She said, you can't draw. I said, yeah, I told you. So we came home and I said, well, maybe I should become an artist too. At that time, there was a guy who was teaching basic art. His name was Charles Baker. He's a well-known Bay Area artist. So what he did, what I did, I was signed up for it, an 8-week course. I learned about colors, how to do those basic things. And then I decided, well, I graduated, I can do it on my own. I started painting. And my dad had just passed away. So I decided I'm going to do a portrait of my dad in watercolor. And that's what I did. And that was a life-changing experience for me, because as soon as I did that, not only was it emotional release, but it was suddenly I felt that I had a potential that has not been tapped. That's where I started. In fact, she's the one who recognized it, and started painting and painting and painting, and that's where I am now. And I'm waiting. If I know what was holding it up, it would be good. Can we do it manually? Besides, she's trying very hard, I'm sure. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, can we do it manually? Oh, you're kidding. Yeah. Okay, let's do it. Okay, and this is what we're going to do. I want you to close your eyes. Okay? Close it. Don't open it till I tell you. I need 5, 6 people come forward. Okay? Okay, let me just. Yeah. Huh? No, what do we think? Oh, okay. 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 Just come, put it on this line. Pick it up. Come, put it right here. Put it right on the line. On the line. Put it down. Okay. Next one. Come over here. Okay, put it down. No, come closer. Okay, that's good. Okay, put it down. Okay. Next one. Okay. Put it down on the line. Bring it. No, okay, toward me. A little bit, the other one. Okay, that's good. Take the other one a little bit more. More. Okay. Bring the last one. Okay. Okay, that's good. Can you get me the light? Sorry about that, but that's the way it goes. Some nights happen. Syvisio number 11. I have to tell you something a little bit about this. Motivation for this painting was that I have always been obsessed with time. And one of the major things that I see, a lot of flowers have been painted, but very few trunks of the trees have been painted to the level that they really need to be painted. Because if you think about it, the trunk of the trees are the ones that endure passage of time, and they show it in their barks. So what I did, I picked 7 trees and started with that, the 7. And what I did was that basically staged them so that you get your emotion, your feeling will change as you move from one end to the other. The painting is about 30 feet wide, and in my mind, if I've done this right, when you're far away, you get one feeling. But as you get closer to it, you get different feelings. If you're about 60 feet away, you get one kind of feeling. When you break it to about 30 feet, you get a different kind, and cut it in half, you see that your feeling will change until the image dissolves. But in this painting, I have, for every panel, I have invented the techniques that are used. And as far as I'm concerned, no other artist has used the techniques that I've used in this painting. And hopefully one of these days, my son is going to write it down. So, since I've been delayed so much, I would like to, first of all, sorry that didn't work out exactly the way we had it in mind. Thank you for coming.
Wow, it's pretty awesome, isn't it? Up here, it's right. So I guess we have some questions, right? Somewhere?
I mean, yeah, this question right.
Okay.
Thank you. No.
I just have of the color
Yes.
and the words that you put, that just came from your head?
No, the words actually are studied by that particular. The question was on the basic emotions, the words that I had on. What are my words? The answer is no. So that particular one is actually due to Pritchard, the psychologist Pritchard.
But the combination of the words,
The way I have arranged it is mine.
so the two that equal love.
No, that is actually studied, psychologists have studied those. The arrangement in that format, in that particular setting.
Okay.
The words are actually put together differently. People know that combination of trust and joy gives love. Okay.
Any other questions? I know there's someone.
Okay? No. Well, you got it. That one is this one, but that was the start, right there. This one, right here. Okay? Helen, can you get the light on this one? I guess that's as far as it goes. All right, it was on this one. But actually, this painting is done with several different kinds of instruments that I kind of made up. And in fact, one of them, my wife was instrumental in getting it for me. It's a lice comb. Okay? Okay, yes?
Did you ever sell any of your paintings?
Talk to my brother. He's the business. Yes. Say it loud because they need to hear
Okay,
it.
so you were talking about the difference of texture, color, east versus west.
Yes.
So the same painting, let's say our reactions to this new Syvisio, how does it play out?
Oh, it's entirely different. It's entirely different. For example, one of the dominant colors and respected colors in Chinese tradition is red. And the dominance of red in the paintings in the West, it just sends you to the red light crystal.
So how would the reaction, can you just say what you think the difference in our reaction to this painting?
I cannot tell you exactly what the Eastern reaction is. One thing I do know, the Eastern reactions are actually they looked at more global features, and they associated colors with the global features, whereas in the West, we more detail oriented. We associate the colors with the details. So our emphasis are on the colors, how details are done, as opposed to the big picture. Yes, over there. Dan, where's Dan? The microphone?
Need the microphone so everybody can hear.
Right there.
Right over there.
Right where on that
Way
side?
over on the left side. Run down. Oh, I can do it. You can do it.
Daryl, repeat the question.
Right. Well, when he says it,
Go
I'll...
over there.
Right there. There you go. Oh, which one? No,
No, turn around. Right there.
Behind you, right there. Right there. Go ahead.
Did you visit these trees, photograph these trees, or create them out of your imagination?
Did you visit them? Well, you heard that. Did you visit them, photograph them, or did they come out of your head?
It's kind of, actually each tree, with the exception of one, is a real tree. Okay, some. For example, if you go to Big Basin, in their parking lot, where you sign in, register in, this tree is sitting right in the parking lot. Okay, so to answer your question, each tree is actually, with the exception of one of them, is actual tree somewhere. And then the surrounding is entirely different, and where they are positioned are different. Yeah?
Is there a difference in the landscape versus the portrait depiction?
Is there a difference between...
Does your response to the things change?
Oh, definitely. Remember I told you that texture seriously affects emotion, and in portraiture, definitely the texture is muted to a great extent. Here, this allowed me to bring out the texture seriously.
So if you actually turn...
Speak a little louder, please, I don't hear.
So if you had painted it in a fashion where it was like 90 degrees, so it was the longer dimension was top to bottom,
Or if I turned it around,
like that. The longer dimension was up and down versus right. You did it different.
of course. Okay, remember I told you that I have three major components? There are actually several other ones. For example, one of them is the size. The other ones are the dimensions. Definitely. Okay? Well, thank you so much.
Now you can go out and have some food, and then look at the stars after. Oh, also, tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. is a total lunar eclipse. The last 5 minutes, it's the shortest one of the century.
I'm sorry.